under the lights and between the hedges on Saturday night in Athens, Georgia. Georgia will take on Tennessee. We will see how far the Dogs drop in the CFP rankings. That will be revealed on this Tuesday evening. The odds makers expect a bounce back and not much drop off for this Georgia team. 9.5-point favorite at home in Athens against Tennessee. The Vols, Joe, just one loss. That's it. The upset against Arkansas and some quality wins this year. How important is this game on Saturday night in Athens?
Well, it's huge for Georgia because there's no more room for error, right? They are in serious danger of missing the playoffs here. Now they've got to take a pretty good, by the way, Tennessee defense. If you thought Ole Miss's defense was underrated last week, Ben, yeah, this Tennessee defense has been pretty underrated here as well. They, too, kind of in a must-win situation here. But my goodness, I mean, we got to stop getting out of this mindset that this is the Georgia of years past. It is not. They got beat for 4 quarters, Ben, in that game against Ole Miss. Carson Beck looks like he's got the yips. He's got no idea what he's doing anymore. The defense is very beatable. Yeah, this isn't just back Georgia because they lost. And by the way, is the Tennessee freshman quarterback available? Is he playing? Is he healthy enough to play? Oh, boy. Tennessee, to me, is a very, very tough team for Georgia to have to face after losing to Ole Miss, because I think both offensively should be able to move the ball rather easily on this Georgia defense, because we know Ole Miss did. I don't see why Tennessee won't.
Yeah, absolutely so. And, Joe, I'm a little bit mad at myself because 2 weeks ago, I looked at the trends, I looked at the numbers, and I said Ole Miss, Arkansas, under. And the game was so over that I second-guessed myself, thinking we might see an under between 2 good defenses, one being elite on Saturday in Oxford. And that elite defense right now is not Georgia. They are improving from where they were in the opening month and a half of this year. Very far from elite in what we have come to know the last 3 seasons under Kirby Smart. Then they went out there and looked elite against Texas in Austin and not too shabby against Florida the following week or their following game after. But, Joe, the elite defense last week in the Grove, that was Ole Miss. I crunched the numbers. I knew how good Ole Miss was. So mad at myself for not taking the under. So my first thought in this game is under 48.5 because, again, there was one elite defense entering this matchup. And it's not Georgia. It's James Pierce and the Volunteers. Ole Miss had 9 TFLs, tackles for loss, and 5 sacks against UGA this past Saturday. They forced 3 turnovers, 2 multiple from Carson Beck, who, by the way, has had multiple turnovers in all 4 games for the Dogs this year in SEC competition, where they have been less than a 3-score favorite. It's only 9.5 at home in Athens, just saying. And if the Volunteers are going to struggle because of what the offense puts out there and the injury uncertainty around Nico Iamaleava right now, who did exit the win for Tennessee after a strong start against Mississippi State early on Saturday, you're going to have a lot of questions about what the Volunteers offense can put up, because the Vols offense that maybe you remember from beating Kent State 71-zip has not been to that ilk in SEC play. Better by far the last 2 weeks, but not elite either. Dylan Sampson is the running back for the Volunteers. Huge edge for Tennessee because Georgia's offense stinks. Carson Beck has greatly regressed, and they do not have a ground game as they did the last 3 or 4 seasons in Athens either. My first thought, Joe, can only be the under. Will I have the stones to go back and go under 48.5? That, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, and listen, when you have a quarterback with as little confidence as he's playing with right now, Carson Beck, and you've got a team in Tennessee, Ben, who we all know likes to step on your throat early and bury you, man, Tennessee first half is the only way I would look in this game. Expect them to come out firing.
10.5-point spread as we get you ready for a huge weekend in the SEC. It is the game of the week. If it's a big weekend in the SEC, that means Mark Zinno joins us here on this Thursday on the early line. Zinno, We appreciate the time as always. How ready are you?
Well, Ben, I'm very ready. Apparently not as ready as you are with the leap that you made. I want to wish you congratulations. I've already set the line at a summer wedding at minus 385 because I don't think there's any way that you'll be able to have a fall wedding in any size, way, shape, or form. So that number is going to keep moving north. But we established the opening line of a summer wedding at minus 385.
Now, I don't want to skew the odds makers, right, or the book of Zinno, but spring could also be, part of that, depending officially based on the months, could be April, May 2026. Yes. So I just want to make sure the odds makers in your risk room have all of the necessary information. Okay?
Listen, all I know is it won't take place anytime between the weekend before Labor Day and the national championship. February to July, open season for everything.
Like when you get later in a year, it's like this team to win the championship or the field. Yes. Fall or the field. The field is minus 40,000. Can't even come up with a number strong enough for the field because we know fall Saturdays are sacred, certainly as the fall continues to roll on. Mark Zinno becomes the mouth in the South, and these are his SEC picks. Not a ton of drastic market movement, Zinno, for that game that we just displayed, a top 15 tilt between Georgia and Tennessee. The Dogs, number 12, falling by 9 spots in the latest CFP rankings. Tennessee remains put at number 7. The Vols did beat Mississippi State handily this past Saturday, but big news for Nico Iamaleava, of course, was knocked out of the game. His status for Saturday still unclear. The line has moved slightly, Zinno, in favor of UGA, now up north of double digits, 10.5. Total working its way down from 49 and a hook to 47 and a half. With the status a little bit uncertain for Nico Iamaleava, the freshman quarterback for Tennessee. How do you approach this matchup for Georgia and Tennessee, knowing the Dogs need to bounce back?
Well, when this number first posted, it was kind of eye-popping to go, whoa, Georgia minus 9. But then you start to think and go, odds makers are telling you something. There's a big gap between these two teams here, specifically what the Tennessee offense has done since they entered SEC play, which is pretty much squat, saved the game last week against Mississippi State. In case you guys haven't noticed, even at that 47.5, Tennessee has not gone over that number in any SEC game other than the game against Mississippi State. Like, the offense just doesn't have it. The question is how good is the Tennessee defense and how much can they shut down the Georgia offense similar to what Ole Miss did? Remember, Georgia's only touchdown last week happened because Ole Miss turned the ball over inside their own 20-yard line. All they had to do was go, 12 yards to get a score. Other than that, the Georgia offense couldn't move at all. Tennessee defense has the capability of doing the same exact thing. I got to go under here. If I have a 48 or 48.5, I got to go under. I just don't see how either one of these offenses really move the ball with any sort of regularity here. Tough to lay this number, especially, when it comes to Tennessee's defense. But, I don't trust Tennessee's offense, especially without Nico I. You could try to say his last name. I'm not going to. You're better at it than I am.
Iamaleava, yeah.
Yeah, that guy, yeah. As long as if Nico's not in this game, Tennessee may be dead in the water offensively.
If we look at this game, though, Mark, and you see that price point, is that baked in that he's not going to play? Because usually for me, it used to be back in the day with the pros, they get a concussion, they're more likely to play the following Sunday. But always like high school and college, they're usually behind the 8 ball saying, look, take this slow here. I don't think he's playing this weekend, but where does that line end up? And also, does that give you extra ammunition to maybe even take Tennessee if you're getting an extra 3 or 4 points? Or maybe if he plays, it drops down lower? How does that play out for you from handicapping from here till Saturday?
I think you saw the initial bump already. I mean, the opening line was 9.5. It kind of sat at. Then once we got the news about Nico being in concussion protocol, that was the first big buy that pushed it 10.5. I'd be surprised if you get another buy. I would tell you, I think if we get news definitively on Friday that he's playing, you'll see immediately buy back on Tennessee at 10.5. Right? We're sort of in college at least. Key numbers aren't the same as they are in the NFL, but 10.5 obviously matters. So I look at it from that standpoint. You'll get a buyback if you really believe that he's going to play. You got some sort of inside information that he's going to play. Take the 10.5 and hope that they can keep it close. But still, I have a hard time believing that this thing gets to 48 or 50. Like, that just seems like a really high number given these two defenses.
Let's get to Colorado because the Big 12 now becomes very compelling. CU has the easier path of anybody in the Big 12 to reach the conference championship game. Colorado is the favorite to win the Big 12. Despite a loss in conference action, BYU does not have any in conference or at all this season. Plus 135 for the Buffs to win the Big 12. BYU at a plus 185 number. And BYU beat their in-state foes in Utah last weekend. That's who Colorado gets on Saturday. Early kick in Boulder, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Double-digit spread in favor of the Buffs. How do you see this game playing out against the Utes?
I mean, does the sleepy 10 o'clock start for Colorado affect them? Do they start slow because the body clocks aren't right? I mean, I could look to a first half under here. I could look to Utah in the first half, maybe, if I'm getting 6. The problem with Utah, again, is I cannot trust anything about that offense. I cannot trust that offense to produce points at will. The quarterback situation has been such a mess all year long. I've just walked away and stayed away. They were great last week in the first half, right? That's great with Utah. Cut the game in half. If they come out hot, they're going to be fine. If they're trailing big, they ain't coming back.
And there's still quarterback questions for the Utes. Isaac Wilson, Zach's younger brother, expected to play. We shall see.
Colorado, 11.5-point favorites over Utah. They control their destiny to get to the Big 12 title game now.
I think Utah covers against Colorado. Utah had BYU by the throat on Saturday at Rice Eccles. I think that Colorado will beat them by literally a field goal. I think it's going to be a great game in Boulder.
Missouri and South Carolina, 7-2 Missouri taking on South Carolina, 6-3. Both of these teams top 25, but a heavy favorite here. South Carolina close to 2 touchdowns here. How does that play out, Mark?
I mean, to see South Carolina lay in this number isn't something I would have thought in SEC play when the season started. So there is that. Unfortunately, it's not, Brady Cook, it's Drew Pine, and that's the reason why. South Carolina's defense should be able to slow down Missouri's offense enough to cover this number at under 2 touchdowns. I like the Gamecocks.
10:15 Eastern this Saturday night. It's Kansas, it's BYU. BYU is in the top 10. BYU is undefeated. Kansas comes in 3-6. BYU favored by minus 2.5 points. Talk to me, Mark. Talk to me.
How bad do you want to step in front of the wagon that is the Utes in Provo at night? No.
Saturday Saints.
18 of the last 20 night games at Provo have gone BYU's way straight up. This is a short enough number where you can lay it. However, this is one of these things where the pressure may start to get to BYU. Like, of all the teams we just talked about all these teams in the SEC that have these concerns about what else, how they could get left out of the playoff. The one way they get left out of the playoff is BYU not winning the Big 12 or taking a loss and then, Colorado, winning the Big 12, whatever it may be, or somebody else getting into the championship game. Everybody else needs BYU to run the table because that just locks up the Big 12. It's a one-bid league and they're done and then they move on. But this is what the pressure that BYU has to deal with is because they're hanging in a spot in the rankings that some people may say they're not as good as that team or that ranking is. But I don't know. This is a stay away for me just because Kansas playing with a little upstart energy here, starting to look like the team we thought they might be throughout the year. But I do not want to get in front of the wagon that is Provo at night.
Yeah, again, this is not BYU on the road in Kansas City at Arrowhead against KU. It's a number that's very intriguing because of that very fact. Now, BYU is the 2022 TCU or last year's Washington to an extent. The odds makers do not power rate this Cougars team very strongly. And a couple times in the last 3 weeks, BYU has escaped an ugly game, but still remains perfect. Kansas has been the most compelling team in the Big 12 all year. The numbers were crazy. The Jayhawks had not covered a number until 3 weeks ago against a bad Houston team, and then kept the Sunflower Showdown closer than expected, and of course won outright last week to hand Iowa State its second loss. I like some points in this game. BYU over in its last 5 and in 7 of 9. Kansas over in 5 of 6 Big 12 battles. The only game that did not go over technically was a push against K-State on that closing 56, but Zinno had the number earlier, as did I. I cashed an over ticket. A big one, Zinno, on Saturday in Annapolis in the American. Tulane now ranked in the college football playoff rankings. Let me just confirm that. In fact, man, I'm really struggling here today. Yes, they are. Number 25 in the country. That's what I believe. Against Navy. Now, Army is the undefeated team, of course, in the American and overall. Navy has suffered a couple of losses, did bounce back last week in a big way against South Florida. Tulane is also unbeaten in AAC competition and about a touchdown favorite on the road against the Mids on Saturday. Zinno, how do you see this game playing out between the Green Wave and the Midshipmen?
Well, I think that Blake Horvath has got things back under control. Look, Navy isn't scoring 35, 40 points a game like they were prior to the loss at Notre Dame. And then, of course, they backed it up with a very bad offensive showing against Rice. They seemed to bounce back last week. But this is a team at home this year that has done very well in Navy, and they've been able to control the game and score. Look, I would expect this thing to be similar to the Memphis game that Navy played earlier this year, that 56-44 thriller that kind of went back and forth with teams playing catch-up. I think Navy has to get out to a lead here and play with a lead if they have a chance to win this thing. I don't know if they can catch up. Tulane's passing is still a lot for any team to contend with, right? Mensah's got over 2,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, 4 picks on the year. He's been very, very solid. Can Navy keep up with the guys on the outside? You know, Hughes, the receiver, has over 1,200 yards receiving, 13 touchdowns. Like, you know, these are mismatches for Navy defensively. So I think if Navy can get out to a lead and sort of set the tempo there, they'll have a great shot here, to win this game. And I'm actually pulling for them simply because I want Army and Navy in the American Athletic Conference Championship game and then to play again the following week in the Army-Navy game. So, which would be pretty incredible for college football history.
We turn our attention to the battle in Fayetteville. Top-ranked Texas opens up right now as a 16.5-point road favorite over the Arkansas Razorbacks. Last time Arkansas played was a couple of weeks ago. They got absolutely blown out by Ole Miss by 30 points, an extra week of preparation heading into this battle. They have won 2 straight in the series, Coach. Last time these teams played were back in 2021. We saw Texas dominate Florida as a 21.5-point home favorite, 49-17. Quinn Ewers, 333 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He plays like that. Texas might very well cover this 16.5-point number Saturday.
Yeah, they had 12 plays over 20 yards, too. It was the most explosive we've seen them. But they lucked into a third-string walk-on quarterback, and they were beyond getting touched. By halftime, they had the game locked up. So it wasn't a true game that we have to look at. And I think you got to look at what Arkansas's got. They give you a different approach. You know, Texas has never done that well against dual-threat quarterbacks. I think Pavia at Vanderbilt was hurt, and he got 61 yards. But they're coming there against Taylor Green, who's is a dual-threat quarterback that can run and throw the football. And that's going to run the clock. I think you're going to see the same game plan we saw earlier and talked about earlier with Georgia Tech. An Arkansas team that's got a quarterback that can give Texas some fits, and a thing that they haven't done a real good job stopping, so that they're not on the field long enough with all these explosive plays, because they got to be on their offense has got to be on the field to make big plays.
I agree, and Arkansas is another team, Coach, that's fighting for bowl contention. They have 5 wins on the year, and not a lot was expected in terms of preseason expectations. They had a win total right in the area of 4.5, 5. Sam Pittman was on the hot seat entering this year, and all he does is step up as an underdog. When I see 16, 17-point underdogs at home, I think Arkansas can be live. They can run the football, very physical with the offensive line. Prior to last week against Jackson Dart, they were very good in terms of third down defense. They just ran up against a complete offense in Ole Miss, but I think they could be within the number, and I think the game might trend under the 55.5.
I'm with you on both points. I just think Arkansas is going to go out there and keep the score down low because they're going to have the football. Texas is ready to play for a championship, but I think Texas is going to beat this team. I think the talent level is that such that they're going to be able to win this thing. Too much offense, but it's going to a whole different ballgame. I think Arkansas on those points, I'm taking those every time.
Have you been impressed with Texas? I know that they went in earlier in the year, got the victory over Michigan, snapped their 23-game home winning streak. Quinn Ewers has stepped up. But when you see certain games, especially a couple of weeks ago against Vanderbilt's good but not elite, obviously surprising this year. Do you feel like Texas is as complete as they were last year when they made it to the college football playoff?
I mean, Joe, I don't think anybody is totally complete. I'll be honest with you. I get so excited about one team, and all of a sudden they stink the next week and don't play well. I don't see anybody dominate from beginning to end. It's kind of made it exciting. I will say this: Texas is playing their best football right now, and so that makes the way you want to get better as the season goes along. That's why Georgia will have to play real well to get themselves moving that way. But if we're going to talk about the team Oregon really is a team out there in the country that's playing hard, tough every week. But right now in the SEC, we've got some teams in the SEC that are so talented. They've got so much talent on the field. You put them in the playoffs with playoff experience, and anything can happen.
We'll see. That game is an early kick, 12 o'clock in Fayetteville, Arkansas, 16.5-point dogs. Coach and I both like the Razorbacks in that matchup. We'll turn our attention to the Swamp, LSU and Florida. Florida getting beaten up now due to the schedule. They're 4-5 overall. They need to win out in terms of the next two games to become bowl eligible. Coach Billy Napier got the vote of confidence. They might meet a very angry LSU Tiger bunch. Brian Kelly still has a 700 winning percentage on the road or on a neutral field dating back to 2017. How do you see this one playing out, especially now since the LSU Tigers have been eliminated?
If you could tell me that Lagway's not going to play, and I don't think he will, that hammy, those great athletes, those gazelle-type athletes, they don't recover from hammies very quickly. I don't know that he can, and I don't think Florida can beat anybody with that quarterback. I just don't think he's talented enough to let them win. So LSU, I think they're going to be the score will be dependent upon how, and it's too early in the week really to say exactly what they're going to do with their quarterback situation, because I think Lagway's in there. You've got a much tighter ball game. And so still, I think LSU responds because the hot seat that Napier was on, now you've got Brian Kelly on it right now, just as hot in Louisiana, because I live in Louisiana, and it's not very pretty down here. And so they're catching holy heck. But I think LSU will respond, and they'll go out there and win the game. But Florida, I just don't think if they have to go to that third quarterback that they can go very far with it.
Diving in to this week's action, week number 12 will start in Pittsburgh. We just talked about the Panthers dropping 2 straight. They did drop that matchup on Saturday night to UVA 24-19. They now open as 9.5 home dogs to the Clemson Tigers. Clemson needs this game in a big way. Last time these two teams played was back in 2021. Pitt did pick up the 27-17 victory over the Clemson Tigers. That was with Kenny Pickett at the helm, Coach. How do you see this game playing out?
Well, I kind of look for momentum, the way teams are moving, what direction their team is moving. And I know Clemson had a tough loss to Louisville a couple of weeks ago, but they came back and played one of their most physical ball games this past year. And Pitt's been going kind of the other way. And I see Clemson going one direction. I see Pitt going a little bit the other direction. So I really like Clemson to go out there and handle these guys and cover.
Yeah, you see Clemson right now averaging well over 30 points per game. They do have the better defense, I believe, heading into this matchup. Seem more complete in terms of the offense and defensive lines, and do have the more consistent quarterback heading into this battle. Earlier in the year, Eli Holstein was looked at as one of the best prospects and transfer quarterbacks. He did have at one point 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions overall. He was a Heisman dark horse at that particular point when Pitt was undefeated, and it started against California. They won that matchup 17-15. He got a little bit banged up. They're going to need more consistency, I believe, in the passing attack this coming Saturday to knock off the Clemson Tigers. They have to get this game in my opinion, into the mid-20s. Pitt needs at least 20 to 24 points to pull out this victory.
Yeah, and I don't know that they'll get that. Holstein, he's been knocked out of the last 2 ball games. I think he got hit by unsportsmanlike conduct or a collision hit into the head, and he went out and did not come the second half last week. The week before, the same thing happened. And I think he's kind of banged up. And it's an issue, I know, for another day. But with NILs going to starting quarterbacks, there's not enough to go to second teamers who leave. Sometimes when you lose your first team quarterback or somebody has to go in for him, they're not ready to go. They're ready to play because they're going to play for somebody else because they're not starting for you. I think it's a whole new issue with NILs and handling and having an outstanding backup quarterback. But that's what's happened to Pitt, I believe. They haven't got as good a play out of their quarterback. And really, so much of football today is about how good the quarterback is, how good he's playing, and can he run and throw.
Yeah, and so the backup for Holstein is Nate Yarnell. He did come in terms of Saturday's matchup, an experienced junior. Did only complete, though, 4 of 12 attempts, 4 completions on 12 attempts. He's going to need a better effort. Didn't throw for over 100 yards. When you look at Clemson and Cade Klubnik right now, still averaging well over 220 passing yards per game. Phil Moffitt, the rushing attack, are averaging about 170 yards on the ground. They're converting in the area of about 42% of their third down opportunities. They get that type of effort on Saturday afternoon, Coach, and push tempo. That could put a lot of pressure on Pitt's offense to match them score for score in terms of this matchup.
Yeah, and I don't think they can do it. I think Clemson's too well-rounded. Phil Moffitt is a powerful runner. He's strong. He's done a great job in the second half of the season. Klubnik is really – we all thought he was a pretty good quarterback coming in. He's got that funny last name, and we didn't talk as much about him, but he has done a great job. I think he's done a great job at Clemson, and they're moving in the right direction right now. So I think, like I say, they're going to go up there and they're going to play great football because I think now they see where they can get to with a good finish this season.
Yeah, Clemson averaging 5.4 yards per carry. They have 17 rushing touchdowns on the year. It's up to now after last week's matchup and win over Virginia Tech to 198 rushing yards per game. They're a much more balanced offense this year than they were in years past, so we'll see how it plays out. I do feel Clemson is the right side. I do feel, though, that potentially we get through this total on Saturday night. 55.5. I think if you're Pitt, you want to try and throw everything you have at Clemson. This is now your Super Bowl, sitting at 8-2 overall. You have nothing to lose, so we'll see how it plays out Saturday. I like Clemson and the over in this matchup. It's turning our attention to the big battle in South Bend. It's top-ranked Notre Dame taking on Tony Elliott and Virginia. From the series perspective, Notre Dame has won 4 straight. They dominated Florida State on Saturday night, ran and threw all over the Seminoles en route to the 52-3 win as a 25.5-point home favorite. They're opening up now, Coach, as a 22.5 home favorite over the Cavaliers. Just quick thoughts early on in terms of the week. I like Virginia with the points. I think they're a blue-collar team. They could shorten the game, run the football, and potentially keep it within the 22.5-point number on Saturday.
I've been looking at that hard, and I hate playing with that many points on the spread, but I got it. Notre Dame is on a roll right now, and they have the college football playoff in sight. And they want to look good and play well, and I just say they're going to be on fire. I think they have more talent than UVA, obviously, but I see them not only winning the game, but I see them covering.
Wow, it will be a good game. I mean, when you just look at it, 50.5, I think, 50.5 is a critical number in regards to Virginia, right? We've seen them play up-tempo games. They didn't lose by 17 to Clemson. That game got into the 70s. They lost it 48-31. We saw them win a very high matchup against Wake Forest where they pulled it out 31-30. So they can and are built from an offensive perspective to go toe-to-toe in terms of certain matchups. But when you look at Notre Dame right now, their secondary is playing lights out. They're holding opposing offenses and quarterbacks, Coach, to less than 50% completion percentage. I mean, that's a phenomenal statistic heading into week number 12 in the conference. So they're going to force teams to methodically work down the field, don't give up a lot of chunk plays. What can Virginia do from that type of offensive philosophy to keep it within the 22.5-point number?
Well, what they've got to do is not let Riley Leonard hurt them in the running game. He runs the ball so well and throws it. And where he surprised you is how well he runs the football. And I think if they try to put pressure on him or they'll let him scramble and get out of the box, that's what Notre Dame wants to do, is keep the ball moving with his arm and his legs.
Yeah, we'll see how that happens. Riley Leonard is the X factor for the Notre Dame offense, really a versatile, athletic type of quarterback. When you think about third down defense, Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame holding opposing offenses to less than 32% in terms of their third down opportunities. They're averaging well over 5.5 yards per carry, just a dominant rushing attack. They did it yet again in the second half against Florida State. They ran at will. If they have that type of effort, could be a long day for the Virginia Cavaliers, Coach. When you see the 50.5 point total and you're Notre Dame right now, you have the killer instinct. There's no margin of error. You still want to push tempo. You get up by 14, 21 points in this matchup. You still have to tack on more because it could be potentially style points without playing a conference championship game.
Yeah, and you know what? They're playing at home, too. This is one of the great stadiums and one of the great atmospheres in college football. I've been fortunate over 28 years. I've coached in almost every big stadium and in this stadium, and it's an electric crowd. You know, I was down at Ole Miss in the Ole Miss game against Georgia, and we'll talk about that one a little bit later when we talk about the SEC. But I do think a home crowd like that, a home game in a stadium like that, when the fans all know the game is on the line and their college football playoff is on the line, I just think the whole thing just generates excitement and enthusiasm, and the team responds to it.
Yeah, Riley Leonard right now completing 64% of his passes, 1,575 yards, 9 touchdowns with only 3 interceptions, Coach. He's coming on in the passing attack, and if Notre Dame dominates this matchup, expect them to be in the college football playoff. They have 2 games left. They run the table. There should be nothing standing in their way. Outside the abysmal loss to Northern Illinois, this team is complete in terms of the offense and defensive lines. And if opposing defenses can't shut down the rushing attack, they can run themselves potentially to a national championship this year.
And you mentioned Northern Illinois, and look how far we are from that. It's amazing how much football changes. It's like we thought Georgia was really something special, then it was Alabama was something special, then it was Georgia was something special. I think Notre Dame has separated themselves from that terrible game that they played. It happens sometimes. It doesn't happen often, but they've separated now. It's the way they're playing right now because it's what people are seeing now. And like I said, if they win out there, to me, they're going to be in that conference, the national championship playoff.
Syracuse, we'll start with them as they are going to take the long trip all the way out to Berkeley this week. Cal favored in that game. Penn State visits Purdue and West Lafayette. They're laying a big number. SMU trying to stay undefeated, laying a huge piece against BC. As we said, they benched Castellanos. They'll put the other kid in. LSU 4.5-point favorites in the Swamp against Florida. Louisville, big favorites on the road, also heading out west to see Stanford in Palo Alto.
So, look, I think Syracuse will give Cal a game at Berkeley. I think that number's too fat for me. I like Hughes with the quarterback. I think they're tough. I keep telling you, Miami's going to have their hands full with them. I don't think Cal's as good as everybody thinks they are. I think they're okay, but are they 9 points better than Hughes? We'll see. I think Penn State will roll at Ross-Ade and West Lafayette. BC, kind of a mess right now. They benched their quarterback. What does that mean? They've given up. SMU at Gerald Ford in Dallas is the play for me. Although BC has covered a lot, I won't deny it. It could be a sticky number at 18 and a hook. LSU, Florida, does it matter anymore that LSU is favored in a football game? Their season's over. They're not going to the playoff. I think they'll beat Florida, you would think. And then I like Louisville at Stanford. I don't know about 20 and a hook, though, in Palo Alto. That makes me nervous. I don't think Louisville is as good as everybody thinks they are. I mean, I've seen them lose games. So 20 and a hook on the road going all the way to California. I know Stanford's bad, but what do you think there, Mike?
I think that Stanford sucks, but that's a very long trip for Louisville. 20 and a half. Could make me think about the Cardinal on Saturday for that game. It could. Louisville coming off a bye as well for that. Remember, Cardinal against the Cardinals you have there. Next, Nebraska is going to USC. Remember, USC changing quarterbacks. Moss is out, and they're favored over the Huskers. Baylor visits West Virginia. They're 2.5-point road favorite. South Carolina, who's been playing great, 12.5-point home favorite against Missouri. Boise laying 13.5 at San Jose State against the Spartans, and Kansas State favored over what's been a very spunky 7-2 Arizona State team.
Yeah, I like Arizona State and the number in Little Manhattan. I like Boise at Spartan Stadium at San Jose. I think Missouri covers the number against South Carolina. South Carolina wins the game. I'm going to go West Virginia in an upset in Morgantown outright to beat Baylor. And USC with their new quarterback will handle Nebraska at the Coliseum. Even though they got nothing but problems, they're on probation now. Lincoln Riley's got a little mess on his hand. And they said the coaches were the reason why. The coaching staff are the ones that cheat.
Yeah, that's right. They get a year probation and $50,000. $50,000 to a school. I mean, get serious. That's absolutely nothing to them. The probation's what really matters there.
They charge more to run on the field and tear down the goalpost than they do cheating.
They do that. It's the same, almost, that's more than what they gave your man at Utah this week with his nonsense.
Yeah.
He only got $40,000 for that. Last one, Rutgers visits Maryland in the Big Ten. You have Cincy and Iowa State. Iowa State's lost the last couple of weeks. Not a good scene for them. Texas A&M laying a huge piece against New Mexico State. Washington State laying on the road at New Mexico. And we always love the late night Mountain West games. UNLV with a very big number at home against San Diego State at Allegiant.
Yeah, look, San Diego State's awful. I think UNLV's going to kill them in Allegiant. I like Washington State on the road over New Mexico in Albuquerque, easy. I like the Cougs easy there. I think A&M's going to absolutely shred the Aggies of New Mexico State in Kyle Field. I'm talking 45 or more. Cincinnati, Iowa State. Is Iowa State ever going to play good in a football game? They've lost 2 in a row. They'll win this one, and they'll cover. And I like Rutgers on the road in College Park over a weak Maryland team. Rutgers plays defense at least.